Hi, so in this task, we are going to use a new library in Python, which is called the tkinter library. This is the one. And we will be creating some user interface apps. Like I know that you created apps with usernames and passwords, and we've done a lot in terms of the databases. But then how do we create a graphical user interface with the buttons and all of that? It's the next thing that we have to do with the databases. So if I just show you what we're going to create, so if I run this program, it creates, of course, a database here, which is called the users.db. And then this is the little window that it shows. And then if, let's say, I test it out with some random username and password, if I just log in, it will tell me invalid credentials because this username and password combination does not exist. So I sign up first, it says account created, and then log in with the same one and it shows logged in. So the first part of the video is just going to be focused on creating this functionality and being able to save the details into the database. Okay, so I'm going to close this one and I will open a blank file so that I can actually guide you through the entire code. So for this, we are going to be using, like I said, this new library, which is called tkinter. Okay, it has a lot of widgets and all. And from this library, I also want to import another function, which is called the message box function. So those boxes that you were just seeing, which has the error or the account created and all of those, we have to import them separately. Okay, and we also need a database to store these details. So of course, we'll be using the SQLite database. I will first teach you how to create that window with the buttons, and then we'll go on to the database part. Okay, so this part is going to be about creating user interface first. Okay, so when you create a user interface with tkinter, you call the window, like the window which you saw, the username password window, you call it root. Okay, and this is how you define it. You say the name of the library, which is tk, and we use a tk class. Okay, it's a class inside the library which lets you create buttons and all. Okay, because tk is very vast, it can actually have so many things, but we only want to focus on the functions that we will be using, which reside in the tk class, which is with the capital T. Yeah, so that is what it means. Tk, the main library, and the functions and the class inside it in this. Okay, we can actually give a title of this window, which I can call, I don't know, the notes app or something like that. Okay, because eventually what I want to do is, once the user logs in with the right username and password, they should be able to store their notes or to-do lists or something like that. Okay, so this is what I'm calling it now. The first thing that I would like to do is create a label. So let me just first run my previous code and show you what I really mean. So this label, okay, username and password is like a label. These are the entry fields. So I'm going to create the labels like this. So I'm going to say tk dot label. I want to create the label. Where do I want to create? In my root window, which is my main window. The text that I want on the label will be username. Okay, and how will that be placed and where that would be placed? I would say grid. It's gonna be like a grid, like a column and row kind of a structure. My row is gonna be 0 in this case, and column is gonna be also 0. Okay, what do I mean by row and column? 0 is basically this. So this is my first row, username, so that's why row number 0. Password is row number 1 because it's the next row. Okay, login is the third row, so everything is aligned in terms of rows. So that's why the numbering or the indexing is like that. Okay, and then we can actually just copy and paste this, and I can call the next one as password, which is actually the next row. Okay, row number 1 here, but the column is the same, it's in the same vertical alignment. So username and password are in the first column, that's why column stays the same. Okay, so we've got the labels created. The next thing that I want is, I want this input boxes created. Now when you enter something in the input boxes, of course you need variables to store them somewhere. Okay, that's not true about labels. Labels are labels, they are static labels, but these two are like fields where you want the data to be stored somewhere. So I will use two different variables for it. So I will say, okay, it's an entry box. Okay, and whatever is entered in this window or in this field, please save them in the user entry. Okay, and this input box will be stored somewhere, like in a location, or I would say the positioning of it. So row is 0 because it's on the same row as the username label, but this time the column is gonna be 1. Okay, why? Because it's row number 0 and column number 1. It's vertically aligned in the next column. Okay, and so I think if I'm ready, I can just copy this and I can create variables for the password as well this time. Password entry, it's in the root window, but here I will also add one more thing for the password. I want to say that please show the stars for the password, not the actual letters. Okay, password entry grid is basically row number 1, okay, because it's the next row, and column number 1. All right, so this is done, and the last thing that I want to create in my window are these two buttons, login and sign up. So we can quickly say, okay, I want a button. Okay, where do I want it? In the root window. What text do I want on it? I want to call it the login button. Okay, now this part, command is equals to login, is something that I will code later, because what command means, when you click on this button, what happens, what command does it take? It should login. Okay, but what does login mean? We will define that later. It's gonna be a function. Okay, so login, and yeah, let's just define the position as well. So row is 2 because it's the third row, so row is 2, column is 0 because it's the first column. Okay, and I'll just copy this, paste it, and this is my next button, which is my sign up button. Command is gonna be sign up, which is another function. Row is 2, yes, it's the same row, but column is 1, so it's on the same row, but the column is the second one. Okay, so this is done, and the last thing to make this whole window work is something of this sort, which is called the main loop. Okay, main loop is like, basically, while I'm working on this window, please keep it open. So it runs in a loop. If I don't have this part, which is on line 22, the window will still show up, but for like milliseconds, like literally 0.1 seconds, and then it will disappear. So you want the window to appear the whole time that you're on this app. So that's why you're putting it in a main loop. Okay, so this creates the user interface. Now the last part to make this work is to create, first of all, the database where you are going to store the information. So let's go ahead. Connection is equals to sqlite3.connect, and let me call it notes.db. Okay, so it's going to create a new database. Cursor is connection.cursor. Okay, please don't get confused with users.db. This is actually my working code through which I was able to show you the functionality, but I'm writing it again to explain it. Okay, so that, and then the first thing that I want to do is, of course, create a table. So create table, if not exists users, it should have username, which is text, which is also my primary key because I want it to be unique, not null, so that nobody leaves it blank. Okay, and I want password, which is a text field, not null, so it should not be left blank. Okay, and because I've created a table, so connection.commit, so that my table gets created. Okay, now the last two things which are left is defining what login and sign up really means. Okay, how does this work? When the buttons are clicked, how does the login and sign up happen? So for the login, what I'm going to do, I will create a function. DEF stands for define. So define a function called login, and here you write the code for what you want this login to do for you. Okay, so first of all, what I want to do is, when the login happens, I want these input boxes, like whatever is written in username and password, to be passed onto this function. Okay, so I'm just saying, okay, whatever is there in the user entry, please get that data. Okay, and if there are spaces like white spaces before or after the text, please strip them off and just give me exactly what username the user has written. And I will do the same for this field called password entry. So whatever they wrote in password entry, please get that for me and remove any white spaces and all. Okay, I also want to check if the username has been left blank by the user. Then I want to tell them that, okay, this is not gonna work, and I want to show an error to them, which is gonna be error, and should say username cannot be left blank. All right, and I do the same for password. So I'm just gonna, okay, here one more thing. I want to return. Okay, return means go back to the main program and not crash my program. If I don't do this, then of course the program doesn't know where to go. Okay, so, and return basically means return to the same place from where you were called. So if this function was called here, this return gives back the control back to the program here, and the window just doesn't crash, it doesn't do anything. Okay, so this part, the second part, is for the password. So if the password is left blank, you have to say the same thing. Password can't be left blank. Okay, so if these checks are done, then of course we are ready to log in. Okay, so for logging in, so if nothing of this happens, then it will just come here and it will execute a query here. And I want to say select star from users where username is equals to this and password is equals to a question mark, and then I pass the UNP. So what this query is going to do, it's going to check what username and password were entered by the user, and does this entry actually exist in the table or not. Okay, so if cursor dot fetch one, which means yes, there is a record which exists with the same username and password, then which means everything is fine. Okay, so show info and you say, okay, success, you are logged in. Okay, because we found that entry. Okay, but what if we did not get a record which matches the same username and password? So maybe the user never signed up, or maybe they have entered invalid credentials. Okay, so we can always just say something like error. Okay, you can say invalid credentials. Okay, it also means that maybe the username and password were never signed up. Okay, so that's what the login is gonna do. And I think this is let me check. Yeah, looks okay to me. Then the last part is defining what the sign up function will do. So let's write that for sign up. So this is another function called sign up. The first part of it is going to remain the same, because even for sign up you need to check whether the username and password have been entered, and they shouldn't be blank. So I'm just copying the exact same thing for the check of this part. And then for the sign up, I want to make sure that the same username does not already exist in the database. Okay, now that can be made easier without running a query, because you already said while creating the table that you want the username to be unique because it's a primary key. Okay, so we can actually try it in a different way this time, and this is a really popular way of doing it in Python, which is called the try and except block. So what we try to do with this username and password, we try to insert that into the database. Okay, insert into users, username, password, values. So there are two of them, so two question marks, which will be replaced by U and the P. Okay, so if this actually works, because maybe the username does not exist already, so if this works, very good. I commit my transaction or the query. Okay, and I show a message to the user saying that success, account created. All right, so if this works, I will try. Very good. But what if it doesn't work? What if the username was already taken? Then how do you, like with if you have else, with try you have except. So try this. If this works, very good. Except you raise an error. So SQLite 3 has something called an integrity error, which is like something's wrong with the primary key or the foreign key or something like that. So raise an integrity error and show an error to the user. Okay, which should say something like username already taken. Okay, because like I said, this is gonna happen because you have a constraint already while creating the table. So it will try to add it into the database, but if it finds that it is going against the integrity of the primary key, it will not allow you to enter that username and password, and it will show username already taken. Okay, so I think this should work. Okay, yeah, looks good to me. And then I'm just gonna quickly show you, like when I run this, it should create a notes.db. So I'm gonna create it. Okay, the Okay, let me just try that again. Okay, so the notes.db was created here, and it also opens this window, right? So I enter something, okay, and I just try to log in. So it's saying invalid credentials because I have not really signed up. So first let me sign up. It should say account created, and then I log in. So you're logged in, okay? Then let me enter the same username, but let me choose some other password and try to sign up with it. So because we had already created an account with Alex, it shows that username already taken, okay? So if I enter something else and sign up, then of course it will create another account for another Alex. Okay, so this works, and the next part of the video will guide you what happens when you actually log in. So kind of a window where you are, where each user is able to store their notes and their lists and whatever they want to do it. So every time they log in, they will only see the notes that they had entered. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.